statement specifically reacting to Eala's victory over Pegula. We are not going to manufacture a quote that does not exist, but Sharapova had already publicly noticed Eala during her historic Wimbledon run, describing the Filipina in 2 unforgettable words, a star. Alex has now accomplished against Pegula. That praise feels different, because being called a star when you produce one spectacular tournament is exciting. Being called a star and then continuing to prove yourself against elite opposition, that is how a reputation begins to change. This is why the phrase, "nobody is safe anymore," should not be understood as disrespect toward the rest of the WTA Tour. Tennis does not work that way. Every matchup is different. Every surface asks different questions. Every great player can lose, and every emerging player still has weaknesses to improve. But as a statement about Eala becoming increasingly dangerous to elite opponents, there is something real behind it. The tennis world has spent much of Alex Eala's rise trying to determine exactly what category she belongs in. Talented prospect, historic Filipino breakthrough, dangerous left-hander, future contender, crowd favorite. The answer may eventually become much simpler: all of the above. What makes this victory over Pegula especially fascinating is the history between them. When Eala exploded into global attention during the Miami Open in 2025, Pegula became the player who finally stopped that dream run. Alex had already produced the kind of tournament that transforms a young player's career. She had challenged established names. She had demonstrated that she could survive high-pressure matches. She had forced the tennis world to learn her name. But against Pegula, she discovered something every emerging player eventually learns. At the highest level, getting close is not enough. Pegula's experience mattered. Her discipline mattered. Her ability to absorb momentum and stay organized under pressure mattered. She eventually prevailed in a demanding 3-set semi-final, while Eala walked away with admiration, experience, and unfinished business. Then, this is Alex now. And that difference is exactly why Washington matters so much. Great players are not defined only by whom they beat. They are defined by what they learn from the people who beat them. A previous defeat can become a tactical notebook. Where did the rallies turn? When did patience disappear? Which balls should have been attacked? Which points demanded greater margin? How did the opponent respond when momentum shifted? Those lessons sit quietly inside a player's development until another opportunity arrives. Then suddenly, the same opponent appears on the other side of the net, and you get to find out whether you actually grew. For Alex Eala, the answer against Pegula was powerful. Yes, she grew. One of Eala's most interesting qualities has always been the geometry created by her left-handed game. Being left-handed does not automatically make somebody dangerous, of course, but it changes patterns that opponents are accustomed to seeing week after week. Serve placement looks different. Return positioning changes. Cross-court exchanges arrive from another angle. A ball that normally sits comfortably inside an opponent's preferred strike zone can suddenly drag them wider. And when Eala is confident, she does not simply use those patterns defensively. She uses them to disturb rhythm. That is a crucial difference. Against an opponent as composed as Pegula, trying to simply hit harder can become a trap. Pegula is too experienced for that. She redirects pace extremely well, protects the baseline intelligently, and rarely needs spectacular shot-making to make an opponent uncomfortable. The challenge is to make her play balls she does not want to play. Move her. Change direction. Take time away. Attack selectively. Then refuse to panic when she inevitably produces an answer. That final part may be the biggest development in Alex's game. Mental composure. Young players often think pressure means they need to do more. Hit harder. Aim closer to the lines. Force the winner. Finish the point immediately. But the strongest players learn that pressure sometimes requires the opposite. One extra rally ball. One more disciplined return. One more deep shot through the middle. One more neutral exchange before attacking. One more breath before serving. That patience separates spectacular tennis from sustainable winning tennis. And what Filipino supporters are now watching is not merely Alex Eala becoming more explosive. They are watching her become more complete. That should excite people far more than any single highlight. Because spectacular winners can produce viral clips. Complete players produce seasons. The serve remains a crucial part of that evolution. Alex does not need to chase the biggest serve on tour. What matters is whether she can use placement to begin points on favorable terms. A wide left-handed serve can pull an opponent away from the court. A serve into the body can reduce the returner's ability to create an aggressive angle. Going down the middle can become more effective when opponents start anticipating the wider pattern. Then comes the next ball. That is where the real value appears. Serve +1. If Alex can consistently use her serve to create a predictable return, then immediately attack the available space, she becomes much harder to neutralize. The same applies to her return game. Eala's return pressure can become one of the foundations of her identity because she has the ability to make servers feel that ordinary service games are never completely comfortable. A strong returner does not need to hit a winner from every second serve. Sometimes the pressure comes simply from putting the ball back deep. Again, again, again. Eventually the server starts searching for something extra. A little more pace, a little more angle, a smaller target. That is when errors appear. That is when pressure becomes invisible. And that is why Alex's growth is about much more than pure shot making. Her footwork matters. Her balance matters. Her ability to recover after being stretched wide matters. Her willingness to come forward when the point demands it matters. Her decision-making at the net matters. And perhaps most importantly, her ability to recognize when she controls the rhythm versus when she needs to absorb the opponent's rhythm matters. Against elite players, you cannot dominate every minute. Sometimes you survive. Sometimes you defend. Sometimes you reset. Then the opening arrives. The dangerous player is the one who recognizes that opening before everybody else. This is where comparisons to someone like Maria Sharapova become emotionally fascinating, even if their games and careers should never be treated as identical. Sharapova understood pressure. She understood what it meant to enter huge matches with expectations surrounding her. She understood the difference between playing beautifully and competing relentlessly. And she understood how quickly women's tennis can change when a young player stops behaving like a visitor on the biggest stages. That is why Sharapova recognizing Alex during Wimbledon carried such emotional weight for Filipino fans. For Eala, Sharapova was not just another former champion commenting from a distance. Alex has spoken about Sharapova as an influence. So imagine that progression. You grow up watching someone. You study the champions. You dream about major tournaments that seem impossibly far away. You practice while most of the world has no idea who you are. You travel. You lose. You improve. You get questioned. You keep going. Then one day, one of the champions you once admired is watching you, and she calls you a star. There are sports moments that can be measured by trophies. Others cannot. That was one of them. And now the story has another layer. Because Alex did not simply receive praise and disappear. She continued building. She kept confronting stronger expectations. And against Jessica Pegula, she produced the kind of result that forces everyone to reconsider the ceiling. There is also something poetic about Pegula being involved. Miami had been about possibility. Washington became about proof. Miami showed that Alex could challenge the established order. Washington showed she could return to one of the players who had stopped her before and write a different ending. That is not revenge. It is development. And development is far more important. For the whole Philippines, however, this story carries another dimension. When Alex steps onto a court thousands of kilometers from Manila, she is still surrounded by people emotionally traveling with her. Families watching at unusual hours. Young tennis players trying to copy her forehand. Filipino workers overseas checking scores between shifts. Supporters carrying Philippine flags into stadiums. Parents showing their children that a Filipina athlete can stand across from internationally established stars and belong there. For longtime tennis fans in the Philippines, this feels especially significant because they understand how unusual this journey has been. The country has produced globally celebrated athletes before: boxing legends, weightlifting champions, gymnastics stars, basketball heroes. But elite international singles tennis has historically occupied a different space. Different infrastructure, different development pathways, different financial demands, different access challenges. That is why Eala's success is not simply another sporting headline. It changes imagination. The Guardian reported this week that Eala's rise has contributed to growing tennis interest across the Philippines, with courts and lessons drawing increased attention. That is how sporting breakthroughs become cultural breakthroughs. One athlete expands what young people believe is possible. Not need to understand rankings to understand representation. She only needs to see Alex Eala on television, see the Philippine flag, see world-class opposition, see Alex refuse to shrink. That image can stay with someone for years. But this is also where the story becomes more difficult, because expectations are about to become heavier. The hardest stage of becoming a rising star is not surprising people. It is performing after the surprise disappears. Opponents study more video. Coaches examine serving patterns. Players learn where you prefer to return. They test your second serve. They attack your movement. They change pace. They challenge your patience. They force you to win differently. That is the next stage for Alex. And nobody should pretend it will be easy. There will be losses. There will be matches where timing disappears. There will be opponents who expose areas she still needs to strengthen. There will be days when the serve does not cooperate. There will be tournaments when everybody expects another deep run and she exits earlier than fans hoped. That does not cancel progress. It is part of progress. The question is whether Alex can continue adding layers. Can she protect service games when her first serve percentage drops? Can she create offense without overpressing? Can she finish efficiently at the net? Can she remain aggressive while giving herself enough margin? Can she manage the emotional energy that comes with being followed by an entire country? Can she recover physically and mentally from one major tournament and reset for the next? These questions will determine how high the journey goes. And that is why nobody is safe anymore works best not as a prediction that Alex will defeat everybody. Nobody defeats everybody. It works as a warning about preparation. If you are facing Alex Eala now, you cannot look at her name and expect inexperience to solve the match for you. You cannot assume that pressure will automatically overwhelm her. You cannot assume that a previous victory guarantees another one. You cannot treat her as a novelty. You have to prepare. That is respect. And earning that level of respect might be one of the biggest victories of all. Jessica Pegula deserves enormous credit in this story as well. Elite tennis needs great opponents. Without Pegula's quality, Alex's breakthrough would not carry the same meaning. Without that Miami defeat, this chapter would not feel quite as complete. Pegula helped expose the level Alex needed to reach. Then Alex returned stronger. That is the beauty of professional tennis. Opponents become measuring sticks. Losses become information. Rematches become examinations. Sometimes you pass. Sometimes you discover there is still more work to do. This time Alex delivered the answer she had been searching for. And somewhere inside all of this sits that earlier Sharapova praise. A star. 2 words. Nothing exaggerated. Nothing complicated. But perhaps those words explain the situation better than an entire speech could. Because a star is not simply somebody who wins. A star attracts attention. A star changes expectations. A star brings people into the sport who were not watching before. A star makes children ask for rackets. A star makes supporters organize their day around a tennis match. A star makes a country believe the next impossible thing might not be impossible. Alex Eala is beginning to create that kind of energy, but she still has an enormous road ahead. That may actually be the most exciting part. This does not feel like the conclusion. It feels like the point where the introduction ends. The tennis world knows her now. The opponents know her. The crowds know her. Former champions know her. The Philippines certainly knows her. Now comes the harder challenge. Building consistency. Building durability. Building a game capable of surviving different surfaces, different styles, different expectations, different forms of pressure. Becoming not only the player who can produce the stunning result, but the player nobody is surprised to see deep in the tournament. That transition is everything. From breakthrough to expectation. From expectation to consistency. From consistency to contention. Nobody knows exactly how far Alex Eala will go. Anyone promising a Grand Slam trophy or a certain ranking would be guessing. Tennis has never offered guarantees. But one thing has become increasingly difficult to dispute. Alex deserves to be taken seriously. Very seriously. And for every Kababayan watching from Manila, Cebu, Davao, the Middle East, Europe, North America, or anywhere else Filipino supporters have gathered around a screen, this is becoming something bigger than a tennis season. You are watching the definition of Philippine tennis possibility change in real time. Years from now, young Filipino players may walk onto international courts believing they belong there immediately, and perhaps they will never fully understand how unusual that confidence once seemed. That may become Alex Eala's greatest influence. Not making the impossible look easy, making it look possible. Jessica Pegula once represented the end of one extraordinary Alex Eala run. Now she is part of another historic Alex Eala beginning.